Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crimson Crossover podcast presented by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I'm your host Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
I'd like for everyone to not pay attention to any tweets I tweeted during the Kentucky game. Just nobody go to my Twitter regarding that. But other than that, I am doing really well. Hope you guys are doing good too.
Yeah, look, I think coming before these past two games, everybody could have done a little bit better. I'll even throw myself in that. I had a terrible scout for Missouri that people can go back and listen to just to boost our listener numbers anyway. But I think we've righted the ship a little bit, and I'm excited to talk about it because the next basketball game that we do play will be March 1st, and it's time to put up or shut up, basically for this team and for a lot of teams across the country.
Well,
I know.
sorry, go ahead, Joey.
So I was just gonna say, I know most of y'all know Charles as Charles, but around here we call him Rage Bait Branch. So sorry, just referring to what you were talking about, Charles, there with that after Missouri. But yeah.
Well, a couple of things. Charles, I think we're going to need the Chris Youngblood apology
Yep.
letter from you at a certain point in time. Um, for those of you who don't know, um, Charles has donned Chris Youngblood akin to Corbin Collins and Dom Welch.
Yeah.
So um, I think after the game versus Mississippi State, I don't know if Corbin Collins and Dom Welch ever did that in an Alabama uniform. Not 100% positive, but we might need a little bit of content from you as far as an apology form is concerned.
Look,
Um,
I thought he looked like Avery Johnson Jr. out there last night shooting against Mississippi State.
I don't. I think that might be the worst one that you've done so far, if I'm going to be completely honest. Um, but yeah, I'm on vacation. That's why the change of scenery is a little bit different. Um, much like what Joey said, there might be a few tweets, maybe one or two, I don't know, three, four, who knows, um, on my Twitter account. It's probably buried in the depths of Twitter now by the time how much I tweet. Um, saying some things about this team when Alabama goes down, I think 11 points in the first 5 minutes versus Kentucky. Um, which I'll say, I'll be completely honest and be completely fair. It was warranted. Everything that I've said about this team was warranted in that moment. And it's good to see that they're proving as some people would like to say, naysayers wrong with how they've been playing. I think that the Missouri game was kind of I wouldn't say a low point, but like a point in the season where everyone that's been supporting this team and not just looking at box scores or just coming in seeing like the Auburn game or any of the bigger games of the season, like that's where your ultimate frustration has kind of been let out because you score 98 points in a college basketball game, and you should win 99% of every single game or of any game that you score 98 points in, and you would ultimately lose by double digits, um, which is just absurd to think about. Um, coming off a rivalry game in which down the stretch you were never able to get over the hump, and that's what it kind of felt like with Missouri, except for just the defense was atrocious. Um, and then you start that for the Kentucky game the exact same way you started the Auburn game, the exact same way you started the Missouri game, and it just looks like this is what the Alabama basketball team has kind of become. And ultimately, Alabama does end up pulling away from Kentucky and taking the win, playing decently well at home. Um, and I'll also say this, following up on that, as we go through all of these games, the Mississippi State game, you didn't start any better than you did versus Missouri, versus Kentucky, or versus Auburn. It just so happens that Mississippi State was terrible on offense last night, and you had a 1 point advantage going into the first four media timeouts. So the starts that Alabama has, it's still a problem. And when you have a top five matchup or top six technically in Alabama, Tennessee coming up on Saturday, You have another top 10 matchup with Florida coming to Tuscaloosa next week. When Florida had your number last year, they trounced you by double digits easily 2 out of the 3 games that you played. And then you got a rematch with Auburn that potentially could be for the regular season title in the SEC. Auburn still has to lose. I think we're 2 games behind, so likely that's not happening as far as that being a regular season title game, but it is possible. You got to figure out the starts. They're not good. They're still not good. I don't know what's up with this team and not being able to just start off games with energy. But those are just kind of my thoughts on the 3 games that we've kind of missed with these with this the podcast.
Yeah, I think what the reason, well, not there's multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons that we were so irate after the Missouri game was that was the first time this season, obviously, that we had lost back-to-back games. I think, going off what you said, Christian, about that being a low point, I think that's why it was. And I think on top of that was because we made pretty much the exact same mistakes in both those games. It was pretty much a carbon copy Alabama coming out both those games. Start out from behind, you pretty much start out, you pretty much start the game, down double digits. Um, and then it just devolves from there. Um, Fortunately, I think the offense still looked decent, at least in the Missouri game. But obviously we bounced back after that with the Kentucky win. Like you said, Christian, they started off slow, but outside of that, after the first 6 or 7 minutes, they really put together a really solid game. Charles, I went to the game with you last night. I remember saying before the game, what I was just looking for was just for them to be building off of the successes from that Kentucky game. And yes, they still started out slow. It wasn't quite as rough as we've seen them over the past few games or really all season. But what I was very encouraged by was just all of the mistakes that they had committed against Missouri and Auburn. They weren't perfect, but it was very evident they've been addressing those concerns. So I really liked what we saw. I think last night might have been their best defensive effort of the season. And so you love to see that at a time like this, especially with this upcoming 3 games. I don't think we're really fighting for a regular season title anymore. I think Auburn probably has that in the bag at this point. But you win one of these final 3 games. I think you only really need to win one of these games to probably lock up a 1 seed, considering how competitive the SEC has been this year. You obviously want to win 2 or 3, but I think if these next few games are just really an opportunity for us to build off of what we just saw over these past 2 games. And so if you had asked me a week ago how was, the vibes right now, they would not have been positive, but right now I really feel like they have a lot to build off of in the successes they've had these past couple of games.
I think Missouri deserves a ton of credit for how they played last week. It's one thing to get open looks. You still got to knock them down, and they did. Credit to their crowd too. They were ready to go. They knew it was a big game, and I did not get the sense watching us that there was an overhang from the loss against Auburn. I think it was just some of the similar lack of urgency and lack of attention to detail, and Missouri being really hot to start that got us in that 12-0 hole that we were never able to climb out of. There's definitely some good moments from that game against Missouri, like we talked about, 98 points. Mark Sears really got going. The team as a whole shot the ball really well from 3, but it was kind of that consistent lack of attention to detail, especially with just some of the sets that Missouri was running, where you'd set a high ball screen for Mark Mitchell, away from the ball, and we had guys running into each other, and then he'd get the ball in the block and going up for a layup or a dunk, and we're fouling him as well. So now he's going to the free throw line to make it a 3-point play. You just kind of felt like we were on skates basically, and never put Missouri where they were uncomfortable, even though we got it to a 6-point cushion for them. I think of the shot that Caleb Grill hit late in the second half. I can't quite recall what the score was, but it was a fadeaway 3-pointer right next to their bench. We had pretty good defense. And a lot of times you tip your hat to a guy like that who makes that shot, and you do in that circumstance too. But what I was frustrated with was just how we let Missouri get into a rhythm. Kind of similar to the game before that against Auburn, how we let them get into a rhythm to where, yeah, they can make shots like that because they've seen the ball go through the net so many times. And there's a lot of teams we've played like that this year that we force tough shots, but they're making them because I think they just play with a lot of confidence. And then you get into the Kentucky game, and that's how they started. We were a step slow, maybe a little bit closer to the paint than we needed to be at times to get back to Carr or Brea. But I have to give Mark Sears a ton of credit. One, he knocks down the three to make it 20-12. Then he gets a deflection that Grant Nelson saves to him. He goes and gets the layup. So that's one really good defensive play. And then the next Kentucky offensive possession, he draws a charge on Chandler. So back-to-back defensive possessions, Mark Sears is leading the charge. And yeah, it probably helped that he scored those 5 points, but I just felt at that moment in the game, even though Kentucky would get it to a 30-18 lead before we really took over, it just changed the mentality of the team as it relates to defense. I thought LeBaron Philon and Jared Stevenson were awesome against Kobe Brea. They were on him tight. They made him put the ball on the floor. I think the only shots he got from three was a miscommunication on a Sherelle Cliff, or maybe it may have been Stevenson on a switch in the first half where he knocked down another three. But after the first 5 minutes, I felt like Kentucky was uncomfortable in offense. Now they still scored 83 points and they're a really good offense. A lot of that was Amari Williams just getting good looks down low. But I thought that was a change from our defense that even though they scored a lot of points, you just made them feel uncomfortable. Um, I also want to give credit to Coach Oates. The timeout right before halftime when Holloway hits the three, because the clock runs in the first half, even though the ball's gone through. So to get that quick timeout with 32 and a half seconds, secure, it'll be tight, but securing you're going to get one more look, one more shot at the basket before halftime, I just thought was really smart, and probably a lot of growth too as a coach. Not that he's just knowing that you can use your timeout because you're going to lose it anyway. As we know with any Alabama sport, we hold on to timeouts like they're gold bars. It was huge to see Youngblood hit that three in the corner when we recognized zone. Basically, ran the same set we did against Clemson in the Elite Eight, and that really got Chris going. Not only that game, but as it spilled over into the Mississippi State game. And something I felt like I recognized with Youngblood was his 3-point shots was more going straight up, straight down. There wasn't as much leaning or trying to shoot the ball before you even catch it. I think Mark Sears is shooting the ball with a little bit more arc, a little bit more height on his shot, similar to what he did when he got really hot in March. Jared Stevenson last night going 3 for 3. There's a lot less body movement in his shots. It was just basically a flick of the wrist, and that was really great to see. As bad as the Missouri game felt, maybe it's the best thing that could happen to this team. Not just to have that result and learn from it, but being stuck up there for a day, having some days of rest as you get back and going light before Kentucky. Look, I talked about the 4 fifth-year seniors. All those guys are starting to step up now. I think Cliff has really played well the past couple of weeks. He's had some more matchups that are beneficial to him with more back to the basket bigs on the block. Not to say he can't guard a guy out there on the perimeter, but I think he's really coming into his own. Obviously, Chris Youngblood had a great game last night. Mark Sears has been great. Went for a double-double last night too. Grant still having his moments, but we know what Grant Nelson can do, and it just all those guys seem to be stepping up. And maybe it is, as Coach O's kind of talked about in his press conference, these guys are hard on themselves. They're shooting a lot of shots outside of practice, and maybe they just need to do a better job of managing, the work that they're putting on their body this late in the season and trying to rest legs and go a little bit lighter in practice. Last thing from last night that was really encouraging. Josh Hubbard got his But I thought LeBaron Philon, I thought Youngblood, Sears, whoever got matched up with them did a great job coming off the ball screens, basically being a caboose to him. The big showed hard and recovered back to Murphy. We just didn't get in those pick and roll situations like we got in Starkville. I would have liked to have seen this team keep Mississippi State under 70 points because we had that opportunity. But then when you see the points per possession was less than one, either 0.98 or 0.95, depending on who you follow. I did think that even though State struggles at times to score the basketball, thought that was really, really encouraging and something you're going to need as you head up to Knoxville this Saturday to play Tennessee.
And also shout out to our perimeter defense against Mississippi State. They could not they were like water all night long. They were getting in and around the screens. It was really it's we haven't we've seen shades of that all season, but it really seemed to come to fruition last night. Like every time Mississippi State attempted to screen, they weren't Alabama wasn't even really having to switch up coverage. It was just it didn't really seemingly affect Alabama. So our perimeter D was really good. I thought last night was our best performance as far as a duo between Grant and Cliff. I thought they played insanely well last night. I think particularly just chemistry wise, it seemed like everybody knew their assignment last night. I don't know if they had more film study or it was just because of the two previous losses or what it was, but everybody seemed to be in sync and everybody seemed to know what everybody's duty was. There were only, I think Cliff was out of position once. I'm sure he might have been more times, but like just off the top of my head, I think Mark was out of position maybe twice. But other than that, it was a pretty seamless night. And while I'm talking about Cliff, just shout out to him. His defense has really come around. It's unfortunate that it doesn't really show up on a stat on a stat line that much, but he's been playing lights out defense. Obviously, we knew he was going to come in and rebound. We knew he was going to come in and make blocks, but he's been able to really just play lights out defense without having to show up on a stat line. And I don't think Cliff goes underappreciated, but just in case he does, he's been really playing some heck of a good basketball game these past few weeks, especially on the defensive end.
Joel, I don't know if you felt this when we were watching the game yesterday. This team is number one in Ken Palm as it relates to tempo. And I think a lot of times we've played really fast on offense and maybe almost seemed slow on defense. The first half specifically, we didn't bring the same defensive intensity in the second half. But I thought we were really fast on defensive last night and put a lot of energy into defense that maybe even slowed us down a little bit on offense, not from a time standpoint of running the offense, but just more of a rhythm. It didn't feel herky jerky. It didn't feel like, oh, I got to do this or I got to do that. It just felt more in flow on the offense because of how active we were on the defensive side.
I think it also could have slowed down just because the amount of confidence they were having. I felt like they didn't, we've talked all year about how much, particularly when they're down in a game, how much they rush, particularly on the offensive end. I think when this team plays with confidence, their game slows a little bit, but that's a good thing. I think really in a game like last night, people's emotions weren't getting the better of them. They weren't making stupid passes. They weren't making boneheaded, lobs with nobody in position. So I think that really because of that confidence, it might have slowed them down. One thing I will say about this team that has been, I'm not quite as concerned about it as I was a while ago. Typically under a Nate Oates team, and I think I might have mentioned this on the pod before, it seems like you want the players, if the players perform well on the defensive end of the floor, it inspires them and gives them confidence for the offensive end. I kind of feel like it's the opposite this year. I feel like this team really gains its confidence and gets in a mood or gets its vibes from the offensive end of the floor. And that's what gives them, effort on the defensive end. I could be wrong. That's just what I think I've observed. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that with that confidence on the defensive end, particularly in last night, it slowed them down a little bit. But it ended up being good because Obviously, they weren't missing many shots last night. I think they were, what, 60% from the floor, something like that, or 59. Well, I forget what the exact stat was. Um, 52%. Yeah, that's what it was, and 49% from three. Um, but yeah, I agree with you on that.
Well, and there's a couple things that were mentioned that are I think are important to talk about. One, when you Charles, when you were talking about the Mark Sears when it was 20-12, he goes down, hits a three, forces a turnover. Grant grabs it, throws it out of bounds, throws it to Mark. Mark gets a layup. Mark then goes back, gets a charge. When we were talking about the game following the Auburn game, right, with Nick, and we were not, and I don't know if Mark or any of the players or any of the coaches listen to the podcast. Frankly, if you do, I'm glad that you listen. I apologize that you have to listen to my terrible takes. Um, but it is what it is. You guys are choosing to listen to me. But on that podcast, we talked about how Mark is allowing his offensive game, similar to what Joey just said, dictate how he's playing defensively. And when Alabama is down a lot, he's not doing the things that are necessary to show the maximum effort, the blue collar mentality that is asked of him, especially as a leader on the team. Well, in that Kentucky game, you get down 11 early and you don't see Mark hang his head. You don't see Mark kind of give up defensively, give up an open three. Like he kind of does the thing where, you know, when generally like in the Auburn game when Mark hit a three to cut it close, he really got pumped up, amped up, and like showed the Mark Sears that we saw last year as far as like an effort is concerned. And then when things got bad, he just kind of disappeared a little bit. But it was very evident from that Kentucky game that Mark was going to be locked in regardless of what the score was. Almost like he did not, like they weren't going to lose 3 games in a row. He was going to do what it needed to be done to make sure that Alabama did not lose 3 games in a row. And then that translated over both defensively for the rest of the game for Kentucky, but into the Mississippi State game where they're going to make sure that they're not losing these games like a Mississippi State. Like that's a game out of the remaining 4 games that they had left on their schedule that you have to win, in my opinion. A home game versus Mississippi State's not as like Mississippi State's not the same level of team as Tennessee, Florida, or Auburn. Like you have to win that game, right? And I'll also say that I think as far as the when Joey you were talking about well it didn't look like water flowing around the perimeter as far as when Alabama was on defense. I think Mississippi State was the first game I've seen in SEC play where Alabama actually communicated on defense. And I think we talked about that following the Auburn game where you just aren't seeing guys talk, which is putting guys out of position, which allows coaches to kind of see, hey, these guys aren't communicating. We're going to run this, get them mixed up on some ball screens, and we're going to get open shots. For Alabama going into the game on Saturday in Knoxville against a very difficult opponent, top 5 team in the country, it's critical that when you're going up against this Tennessee team who's ranked 27th in Kim Palm offensively, you don't give them open shots that get them in rhythm. That you don't, not communicate defensively because we've seen this Tennessee team not be effective offensively whatsoever. Heck, I think last night they played LSU and only scored 65 points, right? Like that's not an efficient offense. If Alabama can somehow figure out how to continue the same defensive effort that they showed versus Mississippi State versus Tennessee, even if Alabama is held to 75 points, there's a good chance that Alabama wins solely based off of the fact that Tennessee isn't a good offensive team, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking for on Saturday is that Alabama plays with the same type of defensive intensity because I don't think that the offense is going to be the driving factor on the game on Saturday because Tennessee's ranked as the number 1 defense in the country right now. And they're going to grab you. They're going to be very handsy. They're going to be very physical. It's important that you don't let referees, don't let the way that they play defense affect how you play offense or defense in this game. So, a couple of my ideas or my thoughts.
No, I completely agree. The 75 points is interesting because that's the number that I'd had in my head as well too. The most Tennessee has given up in any game this year is 81 points against Missouri. You win this game Saturday by your defense, and part of that defense is not turning the ball over. As many times as you can make Tennessee go 85 feet plus as far as, getting the ball up the floor to the basket or anything like that. If you have a turnover, it needs to be on the baseline. You can't have turnovers that are out around the perimeter where they're able for a fast break and to easily convert turnovers into points, which is something we've actually done with as many turnovers as we had. Teams are only scoring about zero point 0.8 points per turnover. Where on the flip side for us, we're scoring about 1.2 points per turnover that we generate this year. So being able to take care of the ball and being able to lock down defensively. And that's why I am really encouraged going into this game Saturday, because I really like what I've seen by LeBaron Philon on the defensive side. I'm not going to say LeBaron's a defensive stopper, but he can be the guy that makes guards uncomfortable, where Mo can be the guy that can play with a forward. And of course, Cliff can do what he needs to do. But for Tennessee, from a scoring standpoint, it starts with Chaz Lanier. Rick Barnes made it public, gosh, maybe a month ago, that they're paying Chaz Lanier to score points. They still somehow got Zakai Ziegler, who's phenomenal point guard. Jordan Gainey's another guy who lit us up in Knoxville last year from the 3-point line. Jemai Mashak is a guy who I think will be guarding Mark Sears, but with the game Youngblood had, it would not surprise me if they put Mashak on Youngblood, Ziegler on Sears. But all four of those guards for Tennessee, they average getting a steal per game. Ziegler's averaging 2 steals a game. So somebody like LeBaron Philon, and Mark Sears and Holloway and anybody who's bringing up the ball, got to be careful. Can't let them just pick your pocket, anything like that. And before I go more, I want to say this about LeBaron too. I want to see LeBaron continue to get to the rim, but not look to distribute. We saw it early on, maybe against weaker competition, but you can finish at the rim. I know you can finish at the rim. I know you can hang in the air and take contact and finish at the rim. And I think as the NCAA tournament comes around, more of those drives that he's taking are actually going to result in free throw attempts, whether it's 2 shots or an and one opportunity. I want to see him shoot a little bit more as far as getting at the rim, whether it's a 4-footer or a layup or anything like that. Because if he does miss it, you've still got Cliff or you've got Grant or somebody like that there. That typically, if you're trying to make that pass to him, that defensive player is probably out of position as far as guarding them for a score, but might have the reach to generate a turnover, generate a steal. That's happened several times over the past couple games. Get it on the rim and let one of our guys go get an offensive rebound. With our team, if the ball's hitting the rim, good things are typically happening. It's either going in or we're going to get an offensive rebound and put it back. Um, Two other guys for Tennessee, Milicic and Okpara. Okpara is the guy from Ohio State last year that really kind of showed us that we had some deficiencies in the front court. So I'm interested to see that matchup between him and Cliff and Aiden and whoever else we throw down there. But defense is what's going to rule the day Saturday. If we get to 75 points, I feel really good about our chances. I don't know if we get to 75. I think we could still win the game if we get to 70, 65 as well. If we bring the same defensive effort that we brought in the first half and are able to continue that effort for all 40 minutes.
And I'll build on top of that. Defense was the name of the game. That's going to be the deciding factor this weekend. But I think on top of that, also just physicality. I know a lot of people were upset about the officiating, from yesterday's game against Mississippi State. But I think that kind of came at a perfect time. The refs allowed a very physical game to be played by both teams. They were letting a lot of stuff go on both sides. And that serves as a perfect preparation for the type of play that Alabama is probably going to face in Knoxville this weekend. This is a very, I mean, it's a Rick Barnes coach team. They're always gritty. They're always tough. They're always going to be in your face. And you, first off, can't let that get to you. But secondly, it all depends on how you respond. I think the team responded very well. Obviously, against Mississippi State, I don't have to say that. Just look at pretty much any stat line and the scoreboard from that game. But I think that this team really has what it takes as far as that in that department. On offense, what I'd really like to see, I'd like to see a little bit more confidence in their shots from Holloway and Nelson, particularly on the perimeter. Holloway did get a little bit better last night as the night went on. He was very skittish early on, passing up shots he was getting good looks, but not taking them. Grant, I think he only attempted 1 3 on the night last night, and he missed it. Really, he's gotten very confident under the rim, which he's gotten very effective there. But it'd be really nice if he's on the perimeter, if defenses have to look out for him there too. He has that shot making ability. We've seen it. I just would like to see him get his confidence back. So overall, I think this is a winnable game. I think it all really depends on just how we come out. We can't afford the slow start like we've been having. This is a Tennessee team that fortunately won't score as quickly, but once they get a lead, they're really able to hold you down and keep you from building up. So it's going to be a different kind of basketball game, but typically when you play Tennessee, at least if you're Alabama, it's a very physical game. So quite often these are some of the more fun games to watch.
Well, it probably doesn't have to be said, but we've got to rebound the basketball as
Yeah.
well too. State had 2 or 3 possessions in the second half where they probably got 3 or 4 offensive rebounds, so their numbers may seem a little bit inflated with their 18 offensive rebounds last night. They were not. They were okay converting those into points. I think it was below 1 point per offensive rebound. But when you play a team like Tennessee that's so good on the defensive side, you obviously want to try to score as much as you can without their defense being set. So that's generating turnovers, but that's also getting rebounds, getting out and running. And I don't want to slow us down, but in the past several games, it feels like we've really struggled to close out possessions by getting a defensive rebound. And I don't know if it's our guards, not necessarily leaking out, but just trying to hang out on the defensive perimeter, waiting for Cliff, Grant, Mo to grab a rebound and kick it out to them. You got to have 5 guys rebounding on the defensive side with as challenged as Tennessee has been on the offensive side, got to be able to close out possessions and not give them second chance points. If you're going to put the work in and stop them the first time, you might as well secure it, get it, and then go from there. And I think the other thing, Christian, that you said too is critical is you've got to be physical off the ball. Not physical where you're pushing guys off because they're hanging from an offensive side and getting offensive fouls, but they will be all over us. They will be handsy with us. We've got to be able to play through that. And to what Joey said, we did play through that last night against Mississippi State. That was an interesting game on how it was officiated. It was loose both sides, and at least it was consistent, so that was great. But this will be this is these last 3 are obviously huge for a lot of different reasons. And if you can get this one Saturday, you have, in my opinion, the team should have a ton of confidence going into the last 2 games. Even if you lose Saturday, you can still win those other 2 games. But this one, I think, is big as far as how you want to finish the season the right way.
Yeah, and we're not really haven't or we haven't really talked about any like tournament implications or anything like that. But that's going to become a bigger topic, especially for us on here as the season continues. And with only 3 regular season games, I think it's important to kind of start mentioning it now. If you're Alabama, I think if you have aspirations to be a 1 seed, which I think they do, I think that I don't know why they wouldn't have aspirations for that. Um, I think you got to steal one on the road between Auburn and Tennessee. I really do. I think you might be able to squeak by if you can win at home versus Florida, because Florida is one of those teams that you're kind of battling as far as a, one seed is concerned, and so then you would have the head-to-head win over them, which I don't know how much that factors in, but um, I think if you can have a chance to knock off Tennessee on the road, I think that's a statement win when it comes into the selection Sunday, the following Sunday, or right? Like we're 3 weeks away from selection Sunday, which is crazy to think about. Um, Alabama right now, I think, is pretty solidly a one. I think they're battling with Duke to be either the second or third one seed. I think Auburn is pretty locked in to being a one. They're currently beating Ole Miss by 20 or 21 right now, which means that we kind of talked a little earlier about regular season titles. If Auburn wins on Saturday, they clinch the regular season SEC, or at least a share of it, because they would have a 2 game lead um, with 2 games to go and the head-to-head victory over Alabama. I don't really know how that shakes out if Auburn were to lose 2 of the last 3 games and then Alabama, one of those being to Alabama. I don't really know how that tiebreaker works.
It
Um,
would be, sorry to cut you off, but if Florida ends up being the 3 in the SEC standings, because we would have the head-to-head with Florida and Auburn would have that loss, we would get the 1 seed for the SEC tournament.
yeah. So, I mean, if you're Alabama, you're not necessarily playing for an outright unless Auburn loses their last 3 games, which they have 2 on the road, one at Kentucky, who was just announced Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler are playing, and then they're playing at Texas A&M, which currently I believe A&M's losing to Vanderbilt um, at home, so I don't know if you can really count on that one. Regardless of the Auburn talk, speaking of Alabama, like Nate Oates talked about it after the Players Era Invitational about how they missed an opportunity to win a championship, right? It seems like Alabama's missed another opportunity to win another championship, at least outright. So you're 0 for 2 this season. So left on Alabama's schedule is the SEC tournament and then the national championship. I think they're making the right steps and positioning themselves as far as almost being a one seed or almost being a lock to be a one seed. It's whether or not they continue to do the right things like they did last night versus Mississippi State when adversity strikes, which it's going to in these next 3 games. And it all starts on Saturday. And I just hope that Alabama can play to the ability that we all know and we all hope that they can play to. Anything else, guys?
Think I'm good.
Charles, on the women's side, what do we got going on?
Got LSU tomorrow night, which will be Thursday night, the 27th of February. Last home game, last game for Aaliyah Nye, Sarah Ashley Barker. I know there's several others in there as well. Got a big win against Auburn on Sunday, was down 16 in the first half, took the lead before halftime, and then ended up winning by 16. Still on that 4-5 line, a win against LSU would be huge. I think would get you into a position to host a regional. You've also got a game at Oklahoma on Sunday, so they've got a tough stretch themselves to finish out conference play. I don't think we will be. We've lost the opportunity to be a double bye. Sorry, trying to pull it up real quick. As far as where this team kind of sits right now, as they head into their own SEC tournament over in South Carolina, currently sitting tied for fifth with Oklahoma and Ole Miss at 9-5 in the conference. You do have the tiebreaker with Ole Miss. You've also got Tennessee lurking at 8-6 as well. Kentucky right above you at 10-4, but Kentucky has the tiebreaker with us. So could still see a lot of movement, whether it's being the number 5 all the way down to possibly number 8. But man, just really proud of what they've done this year, what they've put together. Excited for them as they get into March. This is a team that I think can actually make a run to at least the second weekend, which is something we have not been able to say about an Alabama women's team 3 decades, maybe. So if you have an opportunity to go see them tomorrow night, I imagine it to be a pretty well attended game, being LSU, being Kim Mulkey, being that they are not the defending national champions, but coming off a national championship 2 years ago. And Alabama's played LSU well. I even think last year had a lead on them going into halftime, and third quarter it got away from us. But they put in a lot of work this year, and want to wish them the best of luck, not only tomorrow night, but the rest of the year. And excited to continue to cover them and try to showcase just what they've done for Alabama as well.
Absolutely. Joey, you got anything else?
No, I'm good. It's gonna be a really fun final stretch here. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a dub next time we meet, though.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, I'll let Joey go spend some time with his wife. He just walked in the door from work, so we
My
pulled
wife ain't
him.
even home yet, so
Oh, well, we pulled him right out of the car and said, "You got to come record this podcast."
your
Um,
insights needed, please.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But as far as our schedule is concerned, I'll be back home. I know we didn't do a space last night. I was gonna do one, but I mean, when we win by 30, it's hard to talk about anything, if I'm being completely honest. Um, Generally, those spaces kind of drone on a little bit. So that's why we didn't ultimately do one after Mississippi State. But we'll have one following Tennessee, win or lose, as I'll be home. And then we'll have a podcast. We play on Wednesday versus
Yeah.
Florida. Okay. So we'll have a podcast Tuesday night or Tuesday day coming out. And then we'll have post game spaces following Florida and I guess the daunted Auburn space, which if Alabama loses, that'll be a fun one to um, try to talk about. But we'll have that, and then we'll have the SEC tournament stuff that we're going to be doing that we'll announce probably next week. But um, other than that, I think we're good to sign off, and we will talk again on Saturday. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Both sides.